Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It's not every year that New Year's falls on a Sunday, and it provides a little bit of a challenge for liturgical traditions to figure out what feast to celebrate. Are we supposed to be celebrating the feast of the first Sunday after Christmas with its theme of light and darkness from John's Gospel, those wonderful words, in the beginning was the Word? Or are we to be celebrating the Feast of the Holy Name, which actually falls today? We had to make a decision this week, and we chose to do a bit of a combination. We decided to do a bit of a smush together of the two feasts, and we're going to talk a little bit today about the Holy Name and a little bit about light and darkness in our world and in our lives. We'll start with the Holy Name. The angel giving the name in a dream to Joseph for him to be betrothed to Mary and not be afraid that she was going to have a child, and to call this child Jesus. Now, we don't stop very often and think exactly what Jesus means, do we, as a word? It means God saves. It's a very important word. We kind of just use Jesus casually, I think, perhaps in the church. And we don't step back and think that this very name that we use is a promise from God to be near us and to rescue us from whatever happens in our lives. That brings us to the theme of light and darkness. I'm sure we've all been in places in our lives that have felt dark, and we've sought light. We look in our world, and we see dark places in our world that are in need of God's love and light. And sometimes we're called to be the agents of that. And sometimes we're called to wrestle with these issues on a variety of scales of magnitude. This past year, listening to the news tell of the names of people who have left us and gone on before us into the nearer presence of God it's been overwhelming to me, the number of names. Not only names perhaps in this congregation we've talked about before, but names of particular import in society, names of leaders, of entertainers, of people such as pioneers, such as John Glenn, who've gone before us. And most recently, I was struck by the passing of Carrie Fisher. Now, I was 12 when Star Wars came out. Made a big impression on me. And Princess Leia was a pretty amazing person in Star Wars. We go back into those 70s era. Think about it for a minute. Princess Leia was not the damsel in distress that was rescued by the prince and saved from all danger. Princess Leia was the person that grabbed the blaster out of Luke Skywalker's hands and started hitting the stormtroopers with it. She was the first princess action hero that we had. Certainly, Star Wars itself was a saga that talked about light and darkness. We have the dark side. And we have the victory of the light side. How Johannine is that? The darkness shall not overcome the light. And Star Wars was one of those epic mythic sagas in which light did always triumph. If we get a little bit deeper and look at Carrie Fisher's life, we see that she was a person battling light and dark as well. In an interview, Carrie Fisher said that her birth was a result in many ways of incest. And get that? Well, she said her parents were both huge Hollywood stars, Hollywood royalty of their generation. And she said when they came together and created her, no wonder someone was created who had all kinds of problems. And certainly Carrie battled demons, problems, issues, whatever we want to phrase them, in her life. She was bipolar. She had two personalities, which she named and would talk as either one of them. She battled drug addiction. She confessed that on the set of The Empire Strikes Back, she was high on cocaine most of the time. And yet, in the midst of that darkness, what did she do? She identified her problems. She shared them with the world in the form of 5 books, which were very well received. She wrote numerous screenplays, and only now we're coming to discover that she was the silent script doctor for a number of Hollywood's major comedies. Uncredited, she would take the script and she would make it more funny, because one of her tools that she shared with battling darkness is trying to keep her sense of humor by putting the darkness in its place and being able to smile and turn toward the light. So we have a remarkable example of light and darkness in this one person that I wanted to share with you today, as an example of God saving and God being with us. Someone else is with us today. I don't know if you've noticed, but I brought my little friend R2-D2, who's carrying a little votive light to remind us that God is with us today. And R2, I'm sure, misses Princess Leia very much. She was introduced in the Star Wars trilogy for the first time, putting the plans to the secret Death Star inside R2-D2, giving him these plans, and telling R2 that he needed to deliver them to Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was her last hope. And Obi-Wan would gather some disciples like Luke Skywalker and go out and help defeat the Death Star, but not before sacrificing himself before he did that, and was struck down by a force of darkness, which was Darth Vader. My goodness, being a chosen one, gathering disciples, giving one's life, being struck down, and yet ultimately triumphing as a symbol of light. Where have we heard that before? So I thought we might like to hear R2 give us that fateful message. Hey, R2, play message.
This is almost desperate. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You really help.
Thank you, R2. That was very well done. And I would like to close today by reading a quotation that R2 has been carrying around with him. You probably aren't surprised that R2 is also a fan of the Society of St. John the Evangelist in Cambridge, whose brothers give out these wonderful messages. And this week we are given the word reminder. I think it's very appropriate for us. Reminder. It says, "Beloved as we are, this does not exempt us from experiencing darkness, betrayal, loss, grief, death. We face these things every day. We may get distracted by the darkness. So we need to be reminded of the light of God's great love for all of us. we all need to be reminded that whatever happens, wherever we are, and whatever we do, God's light can shine, and God is taking care of us in ways that we cannot begin to imagine, but we know will always triumph over whatever darkness we find. Amen.
Amen.